Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I have some book recommendations. I think this is my first official book recommendation video. I'm very excited about it. I am an avid audiobook listener. That's my format of choice, and my favorite kind of audiobook to listen to is memoirs or true stories or biographies that are narrated by the author themselves. So those are my recommendations coming to you today. Incredible nonfiction biographies or memoirs that were narrated by the author, and I think it's chef's kiss when the author narrates themselves, because all of their intention and how they wanted to express that story comes out, and I love listening to that. Oftentimes these are memoirs told by famous people that we know, but sometimes it's a specific circumstance that happened to this person and they had a story to tell, and it's such a good story. I have 11 books plus an honorable mention to talk about. No specific order. These are all fantastic books. These are all 4 or 5 stars for me. Let's jump in. The first one that was one of my most recent reads in March was Know My Name by Jeannette Miller. This I saw percolating around Bookstagram and BookTube, people mentioning this book, mentioning that it was a fantastic audiobook and that it was a nonfiction memoir. That's all I needed to hear for my ears to perk up and for me to be excited about it. But when I found out what it was about, I immediately wanted to listen to it. This follows Jeannette Miller's side of the story of the Stanford sexual assault case. She was a rape victim, and this chronicles her experience. She tells her own story in her own words of everything that happened the night of the assault, as well as everything after that, including the trial and all of the emotional and physical trauma that she had to deal with, all of the terrible stuff and just the grief and intensity of what that situation was like. She did such an incredible job telling her story, and the audiobook was incredible. Loved it. Highly recommend for everyone to listen to this book. It was so well written and so well done. Number 2 on the list is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. I went into this book kind of blind. I knew very minimally that Trevor Noah was a comedian and that he is the host of his own show. I think it's The Daily Show, could be wrong, but that's all I knew. But again, love a good memoir narrated by the author, and this one was exceptional. It was so good. He tells his story growing up in South Africa and what that experience was growing up as a mixed race person. He considers himself black, but in Africa, and specifically South Africa, he was considered mixed. He never felt fully included and part of the black community and never really fully part of the white community. And so he sort of had to navigate that life, and he tells crazy stories of all the things that he got up to and his childhood and his mom and brother and stepdads and all of the stuff that he went through. And it was such a well-told story. For obvious reasons, because he's a comedian, it was funny, and he told his stories in very comedic ways. It was great. I would definitely recommend a listen, and I got to understand more about him and his perspective and how he became who he is today. It was very interesting. Next up, I have Catch and Kill: Lies, Spies, and a Conspiracy to Protect Predators by Ronan Farrow. This book was also excellent. Ronan Farrow is an investigative journalist, and he uncovered and wrote about the Harvey Weinstein debacle in Hollywood. Harvey Weinstein was outed as a sexual predator, and Ronan Farrow interviewed the women who came out and told their stories of sexual assault by Harvey Weinstein, and he talks about Matt Lauer in this book as well. It was very fascinating. I'm not particularly interested in Hollywood, but I thought the topic was interesting, and it's one of those books that really made me think about how crazy that these disgusting men in power, the stuff that they get away with and the stuff that's okay, and people just, turn a blind eye and they don't want to make a fuss, or they don't even feel like they have the power or ability to do anything about it. It's crazy, but it was really well done. If you're at all interested in that Harvey Weinstein, Me Too movement, and how it all got uncovered, would highly recommend this book. Then I have Just Mercy: A Story of Justice and Redemption by Bryan Stevenson. This was a recent read for me. I read it in March for Black History Month. I had previously watched the movie adaptation in June or July, just around when the Black Lives Matter movement kind of was in full swing in 2020, and sat down with some friends of ours and we watched this movie, and it was so well done that I knew I had to read the book. Bryan Stevenson tells and narrates his story incredibly. He is a lawyer who has specifically done some incredible work around death row inmates and kids who are in the prison system for minor crimes and juveniles who have been tried as adults and are just in the system. This book follows those various cases, but the main case in this book is Walter McMillan, who was a black man wrongfully accused of murder in Alabama in the late 1980s. So this wasn't even that long ago, which is the most mind-boggling thing about this book, is that the stuff that Bryan Stevenson fights for is stuff that's happening now or happened not that very long ago. But this book like ripped my soul apart. It made me so angry to learn about the injustice of our justice system, like how messed up it is. This book is a 5 out of 5, a 10 out of 10, 100%. Would recommend every single person to read it or listen to it, because Bryan Stevenson again narrates and does an incredible job. It was so good, so good, but it will make you angry. Just warning. Next up, I have The Glass Castle by Jeannette Walls. I have read this book a while ago, and I have also watched the movie adaptation, which was great. This book is Jeannette Walls' memoir, or her story. She grew up in this very unconventional family, parents who had different ideals. Her dad had just different understandings of the way they lived their life. They kind of picked up and moved. They went on random adventures. They didn't go and do typical things that a family would do. And I know that there is definitely like family drama. There's a falling out where she leaves and wants to pursue her own thing and do her own thing that her maybe family and parents don't agree with. But yeah, this book is just a good book about childhood and family and unconditional love, loving the family that you're born into, regardless of how crazy and weird they might be or whatever's going on in it, and also kind of finding yourself and who you want to be apart from just your background or just your families. I really enjoyed this one and would recommend. A great audiobook. Then I have Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, another incredible audiobook. This book is Ta-Nehisi Coates' letter to his adolescent son, and he touches on where America is at and what is going on with race and how he is living as a black man and kind of the issues that his son is stepping into growing up as a black boy. This book touches on a lot of tough subjects, but this author does an incredible job explaining them poetically to a child and how to step into this world and live in it as it is right now and how to make it better. It was really well done. Then kind of a random one, I have Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, Mastering the Elements of Good Cooking by Samin Nosrat. This is technically a cookbook or type of cookbook. I actually have never physically read it. I just listened to it. I know as a physical book, it's a good one, and that's actually one that I would love to own to have as a resource on my shelf. As an audiobook, it was incredible, and the author did an incredible job narrating this excellent resource for cooking. The author talks about the 4 main elements of cooking and what makes a dish taste good. It needs salt, it needs fat, it needs acid, and it needs heat. This book is a great book for like beginning cooks. I love cooking, but I don't know much about it, and it really kind of made me conceptualize what needs to go into a dish and made me a little bit braver in the kitchen and a little bit more open to improvisation, right? So I'm a big like what it says in the recipes, what I'm gonna do. But in this case, the author talks about like the freedom you can have as a cook in the kitchen when maybe a recipe calls for something acidic, like some vinegar, but you don't have that, so you use lemon instead, or lime, or whatever, and the importance of salt and how much that adds to a dish and to flavor. And I love salt, I love salty foods, so I was all about this. But as an audiobook, this was excellent, and yeah, I loved listening to it. Then I have 2 kind of together, Becoming by Michelle Obama and A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I absolutely loved listening to these 2 memoirs. Becoming was definitely more of a favorite. I gave it 5 stars, and A Promised Land was 4 stars, but that was only because Becoming was truly like Michelle Obama's story, her background, her childhood, the woman she grew up to be, her story with Barack, how she became a mother, the different career pursuits that she went after and the years in the White House and what she experienced, and I loved it. Loved listening to it. It made me cry for random reasons, for like hope and joy and like inspiration. A Promised Land was also really good and I loved listening to it. Barack Obama's voice to me is incredibly soothing and was just like so cool to listen to his story. However, this is a very politically dense book. It's pretty much just the politics, and it has like a few personal stories with the kids or with Michelle, but it's not really his memoir. It's not how he grew up. I think he has other books about that. I think Dreams from My Father is maybe his book about growing up, but this one specifically is all about his first 4 years as president, and he's writing a part 2 book about the next 4 years of his presidency. So it was good, but just brace yourself for incredibly heavy political concepts and topics and, you know, all that kind of stuff, which was interesting, but it was just a little bit over my head. But I still loved both of them as audiobooks, as narrators. They are incredible. Next up, I have Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. This is a nonfiction memoir told in verse, but it's a middle grade. And I also read it in March for Black History Month. Jacqueline Woodson tells her childhood story and her growing up, but in this beautifully poetic way, and growing up in the 60s and 70s post-civil rights era, mainly in New York, her family and her siblings and her grandparents, and finding her love for writing at a young age. It was really well done and beautifully told. I would recommend this one as an audiobook because I think the author as the narrator adds so much more to the story. Almost done. Talking as fast as I can from Gilmore Girls to Gilmore Girls by Lauren Graham. This is an excellent book and an excellent listen if you are a fan of Gilmore Girls or like Lauren Graham. But if you don't and aren't familiar with Gilmore Girls, maybe don't pick this one up. As a fan of the show, I loved listening to this one. I think Lauren Graham is a really cool lady, and I think Gilmore Girls was such a fun show, and she chronicles that last season and her time filming the show and all of the fun stories behind the scenes of kind of making that show. Loved it as a fan. Would recommend if you are a fan. And finally, a quick honorable mention, Malcolm Gladwell. He narrates his own books and he even has a podcast, which I would recommend all. This is technically not a memoir because none of his books are necessarily his story, but he writes really incredible stories, and particularly Talking to Strangers, Outliers, and David and Goliath are all 3 books that are narrated by him that were such incredible listens, and I really loved learning from those books. I'm very much looking forward to, and maybe he has one actually, a true memoir of his life story. Would love to listen to that. But again, this is an honorable mention and it's my video, so I can talk about whatever I want, but he is an incredible narrator and storyteller and writer. Those are my recommendations. I love a good audiobook. I hope you do too. All of those are incredible books. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys in another video soon. Bye!